All right, I'm JJ Perez, Inside Runner Sports. That's Greg Lucas, San Antonio Express News. We're coming to you via Zoom on Sunday, the day after the Roadrunners' 27-17 win over Southern Miss. Greg, the Roadrunners kind of grind this win out this week. For me, it starts with the defense, especially what happened there in the second half of the fourth quarter. Some three big defensive plays to create some turnovers and kind of seal the deal for UTSA.
Yeah, the defense was certainly the star of the show in this one. And I think the right place to start off is to talk about the challenge that they were facing with Southern Miss, because I guess this is the product of being an undefeated team and nationally ranked, and the biggest game on everybody's schedule is Southern Miss came in with this crazy game plan that, Coach Traylor said that they were anticipating it or were prepared for this somehow, but I don't know how you could be ready for your opposing running back, best player on the other team to move to quarterback and run this kind of wildcat offense that they had not shown before. So I think it took UTSA a little bit to adjust to that. Certainly Rashad Wisdom said they weren't expecting him to throw it, and he ended up trying to at least attempt a couple of downfield passes and even connected on one of them pretty early. So they had to adjust to this run heavy approach. And I think for the most part, they were able to keep it bottled up. Obviously, the first drive of the game was a 3-and-out, and they only gave up, I think, 3 points that were purely based on the offense of Southern Miss moving the ball. So they were able to be pretty sound against what was an unorthodox look. And I thought what was interesting is the way they tried to defend it, which was they kept really with their base personnel. And I think it sort of works out in UTSA's case that their safeties with Rashad Wisdom and Antonio Parks it seems like they're pretty comfortable coming up and defending against the run. So it is almost in a sense like having some extra linebackers out there. And Coach Traylor said they were worried about number one and giving him one-on-one matchups on the outside. So suddenly when you have the +1 run game, as they call it, with the quarterback run, you have to be able to do it in your base personnel. And I thought that they held up. Did you think it was surprising the way that they tried to approach this unorthodox look that they were given?
No, I don't think so. I just think we all underestimated Southern Miss. I mean, Frank Gore Jr. was good. I mean,
Yeah.
if he didn't, and he was banged up for most of that first half, and it kind of took a toll. And I think the second play of the third quarters, something like that, he went out and he never came back. And that, to me, that was the big, aside from the 3 turnovers in the fourth quarter, that was the big moment of the game where, UTSA's defense was a little bit on their heels, a little bit trying to stop this Golden Eagles offense. And, you say that, then they come up with those 3 big turnovers in the last 6.5 minutes of the game. And to me, that's where, UTSA won this game, because certainly the offense wasn't great this game.
Yeah, and you look at the guy that Southern Miss brought in to replace Gore, and he's listed on the roster as a defensive back. Coach Will Hall, after the game, the quote he gave to the media who was there, he said it was like a last-ditch effort, and that basically they just kind of pulled out all the stops and tried something for a team when you haven't beaten an FBS opponent and you're clearly perhaps the weakest team in the conference, and you're going in to face the top team. And that's why Traylor said it was the perfect game plan, and that they kind of had to do something special if they wanted to beat UTSA, and that's how they basically almost cooked it up. So, but to your point, I think if you have to talk about UTSA's offense, and Traylor said as much, if they produce the way they usually do on offense, then you can't run this kind of ground-based, wishbone style offense, because you just need to be able to score quicker than that. But UTSA wasn't able to do enough offensively to get them out of the game. What did you think were the kind of the issues on that?
It just seemed like, UTSA was in a funk. There was no rhythm. I know everybody's kind of talking about Frank Harris's passing and accuracy in this game, but I think we looked at the stats at one point and it was pretty, similar to what he's done all season long. Clearly the 2 interceptions, the one that was returned for a touchdown those are the 2 kind of backbreakers that really kept this game a lot closer than it probably should have been.
No, I'm going to disagree a little bit. I think it's worth talking about the extent to which Frank Harris seemed outside of his normal form, if only because if you had to ask me a week ago, what's the biggest difference from last year's team to this year's team that has put UTSA to the stratosphere that they've reached? It's the improvement of Frank Harris and his ability to do some of the things we saw with a 6-touchdown game and sort of command the offense through the air in a way that we hadn't seen before. But this game looked like previous versions of Frank Harris, where, he's never going to have the strongest arm, but he was able to overcome that to this point in the season because his timing and the accuracy was so perfect. And it felt like in this game specifically, you talk about the pick 6, the first or second play of the second half, and it's just the timing wasn't right to the point where the defender had time to undercut it. And we've seen him make that throw just because the ball is there exactly when it needs to be, which sort of offsets his inability to zip it in there the way that you would want to. And there were other throws, like how about the one where Cephas is wide open down the left sideline and the throw leads him out of bounds, and yeah, they get a 29-yard gain out of it or whatever it was, but it should have been an easy touchdown if you just put the ball anywhere in the field because he's completely uncovered. And it just, it felt like a lot of throws were lower, were just off the mark. And yeah, UTSA has to hope it's just kind of an aberration or a one-game thing where he just wasn't as sharp today as he usually is, because that's not going to work against UAB, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on with them. To me, the timing was the biggest thing. It seemed like maybe he was under a little bit more pressure, but I mean, sometimes he just kind of missed throws. And I mean, he was the first to admit it. He didn't play as well as he should have in post game, right?
Yeah, and to your point, the protection wasn't perfect. And I think, maybe it's part of it was Mekhi Hart going out during warmups and that they had to put Jalen Gallimore in. And then we saw Spencer Burford uncharacteristically get beat off the edge, it felt like, a couple times, because he's had such an incredible season and looked like one of the best players on the offense. And to have him kind of be giving up pressure like that was a little bit unusual. I mean, all season UTSA has been really near the bottom of the nation in terms of sacks allowed. And I don't even know how many times they got to him yesterday or if they did, but it felt like he was under duress more often than we're used to. And so that could have been a factor in part of it as well, because it's hard to make the same kind of accuracy and the same kind of on-time throws when you're on the run a little bit.
What did you think of, I guess, the play calling just in general yesterday? I mean, it was pretty balanced when you look at the rush attempts versus pass attempts, but I mean, some of that came late in the game, and it felt like maybe UTSA was a little pass happy in this one.
Yeah, it's a fair question. I don't know how much of it was working, because I think Sincere finished with 90 yards on 19 carries, if I remember right. So it's not necessarily a pristine average. And I think his first carry of the game was pretty strong. And so generally speaking,
went down.
It was kind of it wasn't the most reliable source of offense, let's say. So it didn't feel like, any part of it was hitting at the level that they're used to. So I'm not sure if I would say I think that they should have turned this direction or that direction. It was so interesting to see, like, the last drive of the first half, where they hit the pass to Franklin down the middle, and then they hit the long touchdown to Cephas. And it was like, this is the kind of stuff that they were doing against UTEP when they scored on all 8 drives, and then they ran out the clock on the 9th one. And they didn't have that same crispness in this game outside of that one drive. So I don't know if it was anything from a play calling or a coaching perspective that they would have or could have or should have done different.
What were your takeaways from that fourth quarter and the defense, those 3 turnovers? I mean, big time plays, right?
Yes, but the other team had a defensive back playing quarter. Like, I don't know. I don't want to get too excited about that. They couldn't have done much better. So you have to give them a little bit of credit for forcing 3 straight turnovers to end the game. But like the last one that Parks intercepted, I don't know, like, what was it was nobody near him.
Right.
So yeah, I don't want to overreact to that, because again, like, every team outside of Lamar that you're going to face and have faced is going to give you different challenges. And I don't think that they've shored up some of the issues that we saw against Western Kentucky, for example, if that's a matchup that we're looking at down the road. But I did want to say, I almost forgot to make this point, and I'm glad we circled the Western Kentucky, because when I mentioned that they stayed in the base defense the whole game, it was crazy to see that was the approach here, because that was the same approach against Western Kentucky. Remember, they came out of that game with the 3 safety look, and it didn't work. And so they switched back to their base defense and had a little bit more success getting a couple stops at the start of the second half in that game. So that's an air raid attack with 5 receivers. It's going to throw on every play, and you use your base personnel. And then this is a, running back and defensive back at quarterback that's going to run every play, and you use your base personnel. So I do think it's very interesting, the extent to which they're comfortable defending all kind of different looks with that package, and how versatile those players are to be able to make that work.
This is the Roadrunners' record 10th win, Greg. They stay at number 15 in the AP poll this week, and they have a absolutely huge matchup coming up this week with UAB. I don't think it gets any bigger. And one of the things that stood out to me in post game from Jeff Traylors, he thought the pressure kind of got to his guys a little bit. What's your takeaway kind of from that comment?
Yeah, I do really want to. I mean, it's something I'm going to want to dig into a little bit more this week, because it's a really interesting situation. We've talked all year about handling success and about eating the cheese. I mean, this goes back to being 1-0 because you beat Illinois. Like, every week, it's been sort of on the menu that there was a possibility that they could become, I don't want to say complacent, but just sort of appreciate what they've accomplished to the extent that they lose a little bit of their edge. And we haven't seen that. And this was the first game where I don't know if that was the issue. Corey Mayfield said maybe they ate the cheese a little bit. And I don't, again, like he was the only one who kind of hinted that it was that kind of an issue. So whatever the case, just something was off. And I think when you talk about Frank Harris's performance, if we want to zoom in on that with just some of the throws and the timing being off, that does feel like somebody who's tight, somebody who does feel a little bit of more of a burden. And, Jeff said it was interesting. You're starting to get this attention from the city. You had 30,000 fans out there, which is more than they've had this year. And there's certain pressure and expectations that do come with that, especially when you are undefeated and you're a ranked team and you're expected to play to that level all the time. And like we mentioned, you're getting everybody's best shot and whatever kitchen sink that they can pull out to throw this weird offense at you. And so they do have to handle that on a week-to-week basis. And it's interesting to see how it translates to a game like UAB, because that's a game that from the start, that both teams are going to come in there expecting that they can win and that they know this is basically the first conference championship game, if you will, ahead of the real conference championship game. So it's interesting to see how the mentality from a game where you're favored by 33 translates to a game where you're going to be favored by, I think it's 6 right now to open. So it's to the point where it's one of the closest lines that you're going to face all year. So I don't know how that, Traylor said basically facing this pressure this week and being locked in a close game, having won the last 3 games before this by 3 touchdowns, is the best way to prepare, to be ready to have to handle these close game situations, because you would think that UAB is not going to be a walkover. So maybe they can pull some benefit from it in that sense, but I don't know how that changes that whole conversation of we are carrying the weight of the city, as he put it, and the expectations of turning the program on it. What did you make of those comments? Because I did think that was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the pressure is going to be cranked up even more this week. I mean, if the weight of the world was on your shoulders last week, it's double this week at least, because this is for everything they've wanted this season. And, it comes down to this. They have to win this game to win the West Division, to be able to play for a conference championship. And I just don't know if, the play of the offense, it had come to UTSA so easy the last 4 games, scoring 40 points in 4 straight games. So maybe they were just a little overconfident, and this kind of brings them back down to earth. And I think it'll help prepare them for what is a monster game. I mean, this may end up being the biggest game this program has ever played up to this point. So, lots of pressure, I think.
Yeah, Jeff really, I'm glad you mentioned the overconfidence, because Jeff said he thought he saw some of that in practice, maybe where it was just like feeling themselves a little bit, I guess, for lack of a better term, and just expecting that it's going to be easy every time they go out there. But, it's so crazy to me that, and maybe other people aren't feeling this the same way, but, UAB is coming in here at 7-3, and that it feels like kind of a normal year for them. They haven't had the same level of kind of hype and national attention and these rankings and all the things that are around UTSA. But on Saturday, it's a level playing field. Like UTSA has no advantage. If they lose this game, they're not going to play for the conference championship, and they'll still get a great bowl game based on already having 10 wins. But the point being that, even though they've had all the hype and all the attention and everybody's been talking about them, it still comes down to this game the same way we thought it might 3 months ago before all of this craziness unfolded. So we're kind of right where we thought we would be in the strangest sense, given that nothing has transpired the way we expected.
Yeah, the next game is the biggest game, as they say, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's never been more true than this week. For once, you're not going to say it's a trap game.
Yeah, for sure. What did you think of the crowd yesterday? It was kind of hard to hear there at times, right?
Yeah, it was really impressive. We can talk a lot about the delay of games and the false starts, and certainly the crowd had an impact, but also this is a team playing a non-quarterback at quarterback and probably wasn't going to operate the smoothest under any circumstances. But yeah, I don't want to take anything away. Certainly the environment in there was great. It was fun to hear Antonio Parks after the game talk about how every third down he was like getting fired up and doing jumping jacks on the field just because the energy was so high. So
recess, I think they said.
Right. And that's an X factor with this UAB game, right? Because if you think that potentially these teams are evenly matched, well, UTSA has this game at home, and if they got 30,000 for this game, how many people are you going to be able to mobilize for basically a conference championship game play-in against the toughest team in the league, basically, who's won 2 of the last 3 championships and has won the last? What do you have an expectation for like, or what we should expect in that regard this weekend?
I kind of feel like we're going to see a lot of the same. I think the 30,000 number is fair. What the city, the support of the city, and I think it's going to be a fun atmosphere, just like it was yesterday. I mean, the fans were rocking. Every third down was loud, and it was fun. It was like Antonio Parks and Rashad Wisdom said, it was lots of fun. So I think we're gonna be in store for another big one on Saturday, Greg, and man, I just think continue the 10-0, ranked number 15. That's the highest ranking the school's had, and it's back-to-back weeks. I mean, they have a real opportunity to kind of put a stamp on this season with the big showing this week, don't they?
Yeah, because if you get by that one, then certainly you're talking about North Texas. Doesn't seem like that would be a real test game. And then you go into the conference championship game on your home field again. And so now you're looking at that, looking at a 14-0, which is just incredible if you can come up with the bowl game win after that. And who knows where that would put them in the rankings. And if there's a New Year's Six potential in play, that seems really unlikely.
Right.
I would think it's either going to be Cincinnati or whoever beats Cincinnati. So
Yeah.
that's probably not in the cards, but to then, I mean, that gives you an even better chance at going 14-0, right? If you don't have to play that level of competition. So yeah, if they can get by this one, then they've accomplished it. That I don't want to say they're like home free, of course, but as far as the regular season, it seems like North Texas would be a much easier matchup. So you're looking at that 12-0 heading into the championship game. And man, what an interesting championship game it's going to be. I'll admit, I didn't look closely at the results yesterday. I was having some technical issues where I wasn't as plugged in as I normally was, but if it comes down to another game against Western Kentucky, what a showdown that would be with how crazy it was the first time. And you can talk about home field advantage, but you're also bringing the air raid team indoors, which I don't think to see how that match played out and who made the better adjustments.
Yeah, and I think that the East Division is going to end up going down to the last week between Marshall and Western Kentucky, and that may be a winner take all situation 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, so it's a fun setup, and then it'll just any way that it plays out is going to be wildly intriguing, of course, especially if UTSA is still unbeaten going into that game. And we'll see what it means for the college football playoff rankings this week. I don't know to what extent it matters, but I don't know how much relevance it has on if you go 14-0, you're still 14-0. It doesn't matter if you're 23 or you're 18 or you're 12. You're still accomplishing something incredible. But I think they were supposed to win by 33 points if you think about betting lines and you put any credence to that, and they were tied with 5 minutes left. So I wouldn't think that anybody's moving them up in the poll, and I think that the CFP people really pay attention to that, it seems like. And we saw today that they slipped 2 places in the coaches poll and they didn't move up in the AP, and so maybe those voters care about that stuff as well. So they didn't get any style points for this game, but a win is a win. Coach Traylor said they're all beautiful to me. So,
and of note, I mean, Coach Traylor decided not to run up the score this week, just like he did a few weeks ago, and he's done that.
It's true, yeah.
Now. Yeah, so
I think
not interested in the style points. I don't think.
Yeah, who knows how the style points are scored, right? Like, would it have helped if they had an extra 7 there, or are people more understanding that this was a close game with 5 minutes left? And the other team was playing their 8th quarterback or whatever it was, who's not even a quarterback, and all the things that played into this game. It just depends how closely people are paying attention.
I think the stars have aligned here for UTSA with all this. I mean, you look at obviously the strength of schedule, and they faced a lot of backup quarterbacks this year, and I mean, it doesn't get any more kind of, I don't want to call it destiny, but just kind of special than it is. I mean, you have a real shot at running the table here and, competing for your first conference championship. And I mean, it's just a special time for the Roadrunners.
Yeah. It's really easy to forget with the hype of constantly staying undefeated and rising up the rankings, and also how dominant they were the last 3 games before this one. But there are any number of plays through this season where things could be different just on one play here or there. Like Western Kentucky is the easiest example, where if there's not a clipping penalty on the 5-yard line, based on the fact that they'd scored pretty much every drive and had 670 yards, it seemed like Western Kentucky could go in there and win that game. And if they do that, how does everything change? Does unranked UTSA sign Jeff Traylor for 10 years and 28 million? Because if they have one loss, like maybe, but it's just so funny how these things all kind of sit on that knife's edge, and it could have gone any number of different ways. And they, as you mentioned, it's all kind of aligned where they've been able to play well when they need to. And And obviously, I mean, they did so many great things to be at this point, but they also got a couple breaks along the way and were able to win the close games. And that's what it takes to have this kind of a season. Like, it was interesting to hear Coach Traylor say yesterday, he's had 3 undefeated seasons at Gilmer where he won state championships. And even then, you don't play perfect every week. And so sometimes you just have to survive a game like this. And the team that can just continue to show up consistently and do enough to win is the one that ends up with the championship at the end of the day. I mean, ironically, not in college football, of course, but generally speaking, you get where you want to be.
Did we touch on everything, Greg?
Yeah, I do want to mention just for briefly that yesterday was UTSA's annual Set the Expectation game, which an initiative that they do. And I think, as the team has been more successful, I think we're probably getting a lot more traction on this sort of thing than we would have in past years. So people might not have been aware about in 2019 when UTSA became the first school and still the only school to implement the Tracy rule, which is basically a zero tolerance policy against sexual violence and serious misconduct, and anybody who has been disciplined for any of those things is not eligible to practice, compete, or receive financial aid within the athletics department. And it's crazy to see that a couple of years later, even as the NCAA has started to implement some more language against that sort of thing, that UTSA is still the only school that's had the courage to take that step and to really be hands-on and truly zero tolerance about that sort of thing. So that's a really commendable effort by them. And it was good to see that Brenda Tracy was on campus this week and was able to talk to a lot of the different teams, and they just continue to form that relationship. And so I want to give UTSA a pat on the back for that, because they're doing a really great thing there to try to stop a serious problem that I don't think is probably talked about enough or understood enough in terms of how prevalent rape and sexual violence are on college campuses, and sometimes specifically within athletics departments too. So it's awesome that UTSA is so far out in front of that.
And that's not just lip service. She was here all week. She's doing various meetings and events with different teams across the entire athletic department. So yeah, big shout out to the Roadrunners for that. Well, Greg, that'll wrap it up. I appreciate you jumping on a Sunday. Way to grind through some technical issues and coach some of the Roadrunners. It was awesome.
My computer's broken, so I wrote the game on my phone, and now I'm at my editor Nick Talbot's house, which was just like it's going to be a just for fun trip, but I ended up getting some work done here because he can connect to our network and I can't, and you get some action figures in the back, so that's good for the viewers too. So
good it was
we get it done, mental toughness and win the day and perfect effort and all that. So
pound the fist. All right. That'll wrap it up this week. We'll see you. Greg, are you ready for some basketball this week? I think
am I ready for some basketball
games this week? I think.
For those of you who like other San Antonio sports, SAFC has never made it farther in the playoffs. They're in the conference finals, and UIW has basically a win and you're in to get the Southland Championship and play in the FCS playoffs. And Trinity's going to the Division III playoffs for the first time since 2011. So I don't know if I'm ready for some basketball. You might not see me there. There's too much going on.
So much going on. Well, that'll wrap it up this week. Greg, we'll see the viewers, I guess, next week at the UAB game. So appreciate it. JJ Perez, Inside Runner Sports. Greg Lucas, San Antonio Express News. Thanks for watching, everyone.